Hello there! So today I'm going to be doing a nice long, lengthy, detailed tutorial on how to paint with acrylics. I'm mainly going to be using my Winsor & Newton Artist acrylics, which is in a professional paint set. I'm kind of limited with colours, but you are able to, with acrylics, mix some really decent colours. You can also use Winsor & Newton Galleria acrylics, which are a lot cheaper. These are more student grade paints. But in general, these are going to be better lasting. They have better light fastness, which means that basically whenever your painting is exposed to UV rays, it's not going to kind of fade as quickly, and usually you're going to have more pigment with these kind of professional grade paints. So next you're going to need some paintbrushes. These were just super cheap paintbrushes from Walmart. Honestly, I just tend to just buy cheap paintbrushes and then replace them when they need replacing. I don't really own many super expensive paintbrushes because honestly, it's just not worth it for me, because I often will forget to wash them out properly, or I'll leave them for too long like this in the water and then they'll bend and be frayed. So it's not really worth it for me. So I just keep with my cheap paintbrushes here. Now, once you've finished painting your piece, you're going to want to seal it. So you've got a couple of different options here. Mod Podge is a really great, this is gloss, but you can get like a matte finish. This is really great to seal your pieces, but if the piece is going to be either in a humid environment, or like say something like a bathroom, or just, you know, somewhere that's going to be very warm, it can get kind of tacky in heat. So you're going to want something maybe like this. This I got as well in Walmart. It's a clear acrylic sealer, and it's in matte as well. So you just kind of spray it on. Do it in a well ventilated area though, because obviously it's not worth your health to seal a painting. So I'm going to begin now, and you can use like a styrofoam plate if that's any good for you. I'm just using a nice whiteboard here so you can kind of see what I'm doing, hopefully. And yeah, I kind of want to get started with the piece now. So basically, what I highly recommend doing, if you're especially not used to mixing colour, print out what you're going to be painting from. For example, I have a reference here of the Polar Express. Let me try and put this into shot for you. Right here, I have this reference on my computer. A good thing to do is to print this off and have the paper by, you know, on the side. Then what you can do is when you are mixing colours and mixing paint, you can kind of dab bits of the painting to see if the colours you're getting is kind of accurate to the actual reference. If that's not something that bothers you too much, then you don't need to do that. But yeah, so for me, first of all, I'm going to focus, actually let me bring this picture back. I'm going to focus mainly on the overall background colour. Think of all pieces as, all references, sorry, as like made in a bunch of layers. So for example, I'm looking at the very behind the train. Pull the train away, pull the snow away, pull the steam away. You're left with this blue colour here, this main blue. So that's like the first layer going to be sticking on there, and you're gradually going to be building it up. So then we've got a bit of lighter blue here in the steam, and then you've got a bit of steam here, and then you're going to just build up until you get to the lightest part. So always with acrylics, I find it best to work from dark to light, and I like to paint, especially with acrylics, because they do dry quite fast, to work quickly. If you do struggle with your acrylics drying too fast, you can use oils. I'm not a huge fan of oils because I've never really used them too much, but something you can do is turn your canvas upside down, take a wet paintbrush and then just wet the back of your canvas like this, and that will help to keep the acrylics from drying too quickly. Okay, so firstly I'm going to start off with this nice blue colour on the train background here. So something else you're going to want to do is to look at a colour wheel. This is kind of essential if you're doing something with more realistic colours. It's kind of natural, you're going to think to yourself, right, I've got a colour here, I want to make it darker, so I'm going to get some black, put a little black in there, and that'll darken the colour. But usually this kind of makes the colour lose its vibrancy when you use black. You know, you need the smallest, tiniest little bit of black, and sometimes you overdo it and then it becomes just like grey. The best way to make a colour more dull in a natural way, or darken it, is to use its complementary colour. So for example, blue has a complementary colour of like orangey yellow, so usually you're going to put orange with the blue. So what this is going to do, this is going to make the colour more dim. It's not going to make it so bright, but it's not going to kind of get rid of that nice vibrant colour. So if I was to grab, I have burnt sienna here. This is one of the most well known paint colours out there. If I was to use a tad bit of burnt sienna, which is more of a brown than an orange, but we'll go with it. If I was to take a tad bit of that colour with some blue, I'd be able to get a darker colour of blue, but have it be a little bit more natural, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what you want to do. And yeah, just do study the you know, study colour theory if you can. It's somewhat difficult at first, I definitely understand that, but it's very much sort of trial and error, and you can get it to work 100% if you're, you know, willing to give it a shot. So I have quite a dark colour here. This is way too dark. I'm going to take a little bit of white in order to lighten that a bit. Now that is way too light, but we're going to be able to kind of use this in the smoke colours. It's really a matter of just repeatedly mixing your colours to try and get something closer to what you want. This is actually quite a good colour here. That should work for me. Okay, so another thing you're going to want to know before you start, always try to use gesso or some sort of primer for your canvas. Basically, gesso helps to prime the canvas, so when you're painting on it, you're not going to have loads of little white dots showing through because of the texture. If you don't have gesso, take some plain white paint like this and just wipe it all over the surface of the canvas. This helps to eliminate kind of the texture, and it makes it easier and more primed to get your paints on there, kind of thing. So I'm going to take this, and I think that colour's going to work. It's a little bit probably dim, so what I like to do is, once I've gotten my mixed colour here, I like to go back to my original colour and kind of mix that in as I'm painting. Then you have a nice sort of variation in colour, which should hopefully work quite well into our favour. So as you can see, I'm basically just mixing a whole bunch of different colours here all at once on the side. It's always good to just sort of go back, add some more colour, and add a bunch of different shades next to each other like this, because then you can go back and forth and blend them really, really well. It's kind of the key to blending, is having the colours next to each other like that. So just go back and forth. So we've got a nice base colour here. It's not exact to the reference, but it's more sort of what I'm wanting for this. And also, when you're painting anything, the sky or whatever it is you're drawing, or painting, sorry, is never going to be just one colour. That's why you always want to have these varying shades of colour mixed in, because it just helps to give it that more realistic look to it. Another thing you can do if you're having a hard time kind of blending your paints a lot, take a bit of water, dip your paintbrush in it, get it a little bit damp, and then you can kind of help sort of spread the paint a little bit better. It just helps make it a little bit easier. I apologise if this isn't the brightest video in the world. I'm currently awaiting a light box to arrive so that I can make these tutorials a little bit better, but I wanted to get this out there for you guys. Just taking a bit more water there. Just kind of blending in the blue with the burnt sienna. Notice how that really blends nicely when you've got a bit of water on it. Really helps. I actually forgot to mention that I did do this initial sketch before putting my white paint over the surface, because the white paint I used isn't sort of pigmented enough to cover up the sketch. You can always do the sketch over the paint if you want to. I just find it easier to erase if it's just directly on the canvas itself. So long as the paint is still wet, you can easily blend the colours. Like, I'm adding white in, but it blends quite nicely with the rest of the colours as they are still wet underneath. So that's why with acrylics you really want to work quickly, because they do dry super fast and you really kind of want to still be able to play with your colours a little bit. So do work as quickly as you can. So I've basically done the background now. The sky needed to sort of touching up in a couple of places, but I'm going to leave that for now. I'm now going to work on the snow, the bottom, which is like a kind of like a pale blue. So yeah, I have my little mixture of colours here. This is for the sky. I'm going to go a little bit further up and worry about the snow here. I'm going to use a little bit of this blue, which I've not actually said the name of this. This is ultramarine blue, if anyone's interested. I'm thinking just mixing this with a little bit of white may actually get me to the colour I want to be, because it's quite a soft blue. But if not, I may need a little bit of my burnt sienna to kind of dim the colour, but I think actually as it is, I think this will actually work quite well for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this in as the snow. To blend it in a little bit more, I'm just going to add some white in there. See, it just sort of smooths it out a little bit and gives it that nice effect. And remember, when you're painting with acrylics as well, you're painting in shapes. So you don't worry too much about your details yet, just worry about sort of the shapes and how things are blocked in. I added in a small amount of burnt sienna to kind of make the blue a little bit more dim. I'm not sure if you can see that from this distance, but this is the blue mixed with the white. This is the blue mixed with the white with a little bit of burnt sienna. Notice how it's a lot more dimmed down, but also kind of more realistic. It gives that nice change in hue. So it's always nice to sort of balance your colours out a little bit more. I am never someone who waits for a layer to dry. I just kind of like Bob Ross did with his oils, the wet on wet technique. So you're just basically painting while the paint is still wet, because this is the only way you're going to get any form of blending going on here. So don't worry about waiting for your layers to dry. They should be slightly wet so you're able to blend them quite well. Okay, so I have a layer of the snow down now. So what I need to concentrate on now is kind of on the train itself. And there's a lot of steam because it's a steam train. So this is basically white, which is why I've not really blended that together. This is all kind of patchy and splotchy and steamy. Same with certain areas of this. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to just work on the base colour of the train. So if I'm looking at the picture here, I can see that it's kind of like a, if I look at the main colours on this train, it's basically like a steel grey, greyish blue. So I'm just going to go with this kind of colour right here and just do it all over, and then I'm going to work up and put some darker layers in and some lighter layers as well, because if you notice these areas are darker here. They're not solid black though. They're not solid black, they're just a darker shade of this kind of blue. If I was to make this black, it would not look remotely like the picture. It would look very, very fake and very, very cartoon-like. So it's just a matter of really analysing the colours in the piece. As you can see, these little areas here are lighter. The highlights are almost pure white, which is good. You usually will find that in highlights, but not quite. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to colour in the base of the train for now, and then I'll work on the extra layers after. So this colour, literally, all I'm doing is using the burnt sienna, the ultramarine blue, and then a bit of white, and I'm kind of achieving that nice steel grey colour that I want so much for the train. So yeah, this is looking good now. And you can kind of see how many different colours you can create with such a limited palette. And often you'll find if you are using the same palette in a piece and you're using very limited colours, they're all going to blend together really nicely as well, and just the colours are going to complement each other because they're kind of working from the same base colours. Okay, so I'm going to maybe make this a little bit darker. So it's quite a long process, but basically what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the base colour and then kind of mixing it with a little bit of white. So now I can get like a paler colour, and then I can sort of work in the highlight colours like that. I just want to work back and forth because there's quite a lot of dark in the train, so obviously I want to work while the paint's still wet. So pretty much I just work back and forth with the colours until I'm happy with what I've got. But yeah, usually with highlight I just add a little bit of white in there and achieve kind of the colour I'm hoping to get. As for getting something a little bit darker, you can definitely still mix in a little bit of black as well. But just use it sparingly because black usually is quite pigmented. Highlights you usually add right at the end, but I'm someone who likes to kind of add them in throughout the painting process. So really it's just how you prefer to do it. But I personally just like to go back and forth with light and shadow just to, I don't know, just to sort of get it to work for me. Okay, I'm just going to finish off these bits off camera because I have 13 minutes battery left. And yeah, I'll show you when I'm doing all the cloudy stuff, but for now, I'm going to skip time right now. Shading can be really easy. If you've got like your base colour, you can add a little bit of white to it if you want it a little bit lighter, and just put it in there and then add it to the part that you're painting. It's kind of a lot of trial and error really, but I tend to just have my base colour, add a little bit of white in, or maybe a little bit of black if I need it, you know, to be dim. And that just kind of helps to blend the colours together really well. You can also add in obviously any other colour you want to try to change the tone of it, but personally I just like to experiment a little bit with it. Okay, now I'm going to work on the smoke. So looking at the, let me pull the reference picture out again. If I'm looking at the reference picture here, notice how the smoke is a few different colours, or the steam, sorry. There's a sort of paler blue here and then it's whiter and it kind of fades like that. So I'm going to start with like the behind layer, the sort of the blue colour, and then go into the white. Most of this itself is kind of like a pale, basically a very, very, very pale blue, not pure white. And I'm just going to kind of do my best to show you how to do this, because even I myself, I am still kind of experimenting with the best way to do stuff like smoke. So yeah, let's get going with that, and I will show you what I do. And apologies if I sound a bit more quiet. I've just woken up, it's like 7 in the morning because I have to finish this. I'll start off with a brush like this. This isn't the best brush you can use, to be honest, but I'm going to make it work. A good brush you can use are those kind of like fan ones, because you can kind of twist them around a little bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a colour kind of close to this, but a little bit lighter so it blends well, because obviously this is dry, it's not wet like it was last night. Got a little bit of burnt sienna to dim it a little bit. A little bit more blue. More white. So I'm going to go with this, and then kind of just like loosely brush it on, like in a round motion, following kind of the shapes that are on the reference picture. Add a little bit of blue in there. But the key really with this kind of thing, and same with clouds, is to really sort of circle it in. I'm just going back and forth with different colours at the moment. But as you can see, the roundness of the brush is kind of giving that illusion. And if you go a little bit too bright, that's fine, because you can actually add in some darker later to kind of make it look less cartoon-like and rubbish. Not saying cartoons are rubbish, by the way, I just mean that it can look kind of rubbish if you don't do it right. It's always best to layer it on, so you can start with a darker colour and then add some white in while it's still wet, and then kind of blend it quite nicely into the other colours. Just like that, keep going with the circular motion until it kind of somewhat looks like what you are trying to achieve. But yeah, the key really is to just keep adding colour over colour while it's still wet in a circular motion. You can go back and add in like some darker colours, like I'm going to add some more blue. Again, try and get some water on your paintbrush, like make it a little bit damp. Makes it a little bit easier to spread the paint. and also because when you make the paintbrush wet, it's more translucent, so it kind of, when doing clouds especially, it can make it sort of more cloud-like or smoke-like. If you look at like a picture of a cloud or smoke, you're going to see there's a lot of varying shades of colour in them. It's not just pure white, it's the different layers that make it look like a cloud, that give it that sort of shape and effect. So you've always got to kind of go in, add some darker, give it some texture. You can go back in with some lighter colour as well. That's the thing with paints, you can always, you know, if you mess it up, you can always fix it again later on. For the edges, I'm just kind of trying to carry it around as best I can. It's kind of difficult and it's not perfect, but I always forget to paint the edges, so I'm just doing them now while I think of it. I'm just adding in some darker colours here to kind of feather it out a little bit better, because it was looking a bit unnatural the way it was blended in. So I'm just kind of blending in the clouds a little bit better now. They take time, back and forthing with different colours, but you'll get there eventually. Okay, so we're done. I'm just going to add the snow now, which I'm just going to use a very sort of fine point paintbrush for. I'm just going to dot it all over. Actually, I've just realised I've not done the beam of light, which is kind of important, I would say. Okay, so you might find you've got a few bits that are kind of showing through and not perfectly neat. Try not to worry too much about that. I often will go over with a black marker on the bits that are sort of white or dotty. But other than that, you know, just keep going over it and trying to fill in the little gaps that you're seeing. So yeah, this is what I've done. Finished the sides off, as you can see, and that's how it looks. What do you think? If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you for watching.